Hey 12, welcome back. This is lesson 5. What we're going to look at today is the role of important people and power structures in Buddhism. So this has got to do with a lot of the kind of figureheads, I suppose, of Buddhism. The role they play, why that's important in general. And then the second half of that dot point is looking at power structures. So generally we think of those pyramid hierarchies that you sort of create. We're sort of going to look at power structures within Buddhism as well. Sort of how monasteries will function. Sort of like if you look at a school, the power structure might be students and then teachers and then the principals and deputies, that kind of thing. Again, some quick revision. Write this question down in your books and give it an answer. So how does Buddhism define gender and gender roles? We looked at that last lesson, so I just want you to briefly answer that and I'll give it a read and check it. Slide 3 here. So here when we're looking at, we'll start off with power structures. So in Buddhism itself, there's no absolute hierarchy. There's no official kind of, I'm the top dog, you're the bottom dog. But certainly when we analyze Buddhism and look into it a bit more, you can sort of see that there is some form of hierarchy. Again, it's not set in stone, so we can't ever technically say it exists, I suppose. There are sort of different levels though. There are monastics and lay people, and men and women. Okay, so the idea of monastics, they're your monks and nuns. They're the active sort of disciples of Buddha's way, and then you have lay people, who are sort of general followers that believe in Buddhism, and then you kind of have everyone else. In terms of the power structure within Buddhism, a monastery will typically, so if we look at monastery or a temple, they're generally going to have an abbot and senior ranking monks or nuns, and they're the sort of people who will organise daily routines and rituals for the people. So for example, at the Nantian temple, when they do the chanting service, there's usually one monk who does a lot of the singing that introduces each section of it, okay, and they're generally the more senior monks, those that have been around longer. So there is kind of a power structure. Generally, those senior monks and abbots will have a bit more responsibility than your everyday kind of monks or nuns. They're also the ones that are sort of spoken to and sought out for their spiritual teachings and guidance as well. So again, that power structure certainly has different roles and responsibilities. That's sort of it in Theravada and Mahayana. In Tibet, Tibetan Buddhism, there's a series of reincarnated spiritual leaders, and they're called lamas, aka you may have heard of the Dalai Lama, and they're venerated by everyone. So venerated mean honoured and accepted, pretty much. In the case of the Dalai Lama, who is seen as Buddha reincarnated, he's an important spiritual leader, but he's also becoming a political leader in our world as well. When a big world event happens, a lot of countries and things will, even if they're not Buddhists themselves, will seek out the opinion of the Dalai Lama because he's highly respected. So in terms of that power structure, you can sort of see him, that's a picture of him there. You can understand that idea that he's sort of at the top of a power structure, because he's sort of the leader. He's the voice for Buddhism around the world. And you can see in that quote there, he's saying, the world doesn't belong to leaders, the world belongs to all humanity. In traditional Buddhist cultures, Theravada, men obviously, like if we're sort of breaking it down, men definitely have more spiritual and temporal power over women in terms of their roles. Last lesson we looked at how there are additional rules for women who are in Theravada compared to men. So within that sort of strand or adherence of Buddhism, you can definitely see there's a bit of a dynamic in power. Monastics themselves, so again, that's anyone who's a monk or a nun, they're treated with reverence in many Asian societies. It generally demands a great deal of power and authority for them, as well as respect, despite the fact that they have little material wealth or power. That idea that they're a spiritual guru, I suppose, the sacrifices they make to become a monk and nun is highly respected, and their opinions are very valued in those countries. Following on, Buddha didn't seek personal power or imposing his will on others by creating a hierarchy. So there is, again, no official power structure. Of course, there are cultural lines and power structures we can determine based off how we see the faith operating. So, for example, that Theravada thing, we can see that, but there's nowhere written in the Pali Canon where it says monks should be treated better than nuns or anything like that. If anything, it pleads the case that they are equal. Buddha also recommended to his monks that regular councils based upon republican traditions would ensure the growth of the Sangha. So that idea simply there is that Buddhism should be adapting to the culture in which it's operating. So, for example, Western culture, in the case of the Nantian Temple, that idea that they're respecting freedom and that idea for people to make their own decisions about it, he saw as key. So that in itself isn't really allowing much of a power structure in terms of it having to adapt to different cultures. However, despite him not wanting to talk about power structures, he still, in his time, within small states, he would be obliged to define the ideal ruler. Because, of course, he understands the cultural traditions at the time, and that's, again, sort of in line with here, trying to make sure that the belief system is reflective of the current culture and social context in which it operates. In terms of the role of important people in Buddhism, there are a few. I want you to research one, but obviously the top dog is the Dalai Lama here. I've done a bit of a bio of him, so where he was born, what age he was identified as the next sort of Dalai Lama, if you will. He is currently in exile, living in India. Basically, China has taken over the part of Nepal that he used to live in. Excuse me. And they reject Tibetan Buddhism in its entirety. So he's sort of in exile, and if he does go into that country, he'll be arrested for spreading, false belief and that kind of thing. Generally, he's seen as a source of wisdom around the world and promoted peace around the globe. So much so that he has received a Nobel Peace Prize for his work, especially which it advocates for non-violence around the world. So you can sort of see the role that he plays is quite important to society. He serves as a function or a source of guidance for everyone, whether or not you're a Buddhist. He still serves that important role. What I've got in slide 5, if you've got time to watch it, is some interviews he's done with Karl Stefanovic, an Australian journo. So they're interesting to watch. I guess the idea behind that is that other cultures around the world are fascinated by that. So that sort of just, again, speaks volumes to his importance. They wouldn't be giving him the time of day if he wasn't seen as having an important role in society. What I want you to do after that is research one of these people. So each of them have their own importance to Buddhism. So I want you to research just one of them and discuss their importance to Buddhism. So why are they important to the Buddhist faith? What have they done, essentially? And then lastly, there's a quote here by the Dalai Lama, which I just put in there because I thought it was really powerful and poignant. You can see through this quote. I'll let you guys read it yourselves, but when you do read it, you'll sort of get that idea of why he's considered a very important person to the world for some of the advice I suppose he can give. That's it for lesson 5, and indeed this week as well. So congratulations. Make sure you work on your PIP, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.